Good morning. Welcome to your program, Your Agenda, here on Cignal TV's One News, Channels 8 and 250. Thank you for joining us today, for being Cignal TV subscribers, and of course, to those of you who follow us via Facebook or YouTube or the Cignal Play app. Thank you also to PLDT Home Fiber Optic Internet. Laging maasahan. Today is Friday, September 15. Okay, I had to make sure kasi baka sa sweldo kayo, careful. Please put the money that belongs to the Lord. Put money that should go into savings, and then the rest on budgets. And if you are single, living with your parents, may I remind you, please share in the cost of running the home or the paying for the food, etc. Start with your part or your role in the family. Anyway, those of you traveling out of town today, heads up, I am almost sure traffic is going to be a bit heavy because that's usually the case. Pag payday, a lot of people go home outside Metro Manila or go to the province to bring money, baon, budgets for their families, parents, relatives, etc. So I've observed that in the past, but I don't know if companies do still observe the 15:30. Pero ganun pa rin, matraffic pag 15 and 30 on the expressways. Now, today we are going to be tackling two topics. First topic will be about the guardian angels of the environment, our environmental defenders. But unfortunately, we have to ask the question, who is defending the defenders? Because global reports indicate that being a defender or an environmental activist in the Philippines can be dangerous to your health. In fact, it can get you killed. So we will tackle that on the first part. And on the second part, we will tackle something lighter, something interesting, something you can do for the weekend, but we'll get to that later after we get to our we get through to our usual introductions. First, thank you to PLDT Home Fiber Optic Internet, Mr. Marco Borlongan. As always, maraming salamat. And for today's daily starter, it comes from motivational speaker John Maxwell, and it goes, "The people who change the world are those who want to and don't wait to." Yan po. That is so true. If you want to change the world or you want to change the environment in your bedroom, okay, it's going to happen when you do and not when you wait, okay? So go out and do it. Let's go to the front page of the Philippine Star today, September 15, 2023. It's a Friday, and the headline is, Philippines may import rice all the way from Argentina. If you are wondering why it sounds so far, it is because it is very far. Pero what surprises me is Argentina can actually sell rice to the Philippines. I don't mind them selling us Argentinian beef. Diba? Yung sikat sa Argentina, Carne Norte. Okay, but apparently the Philippines, amid the high prices of rice in the country, the Philippines is looking at importing the Filipino staple as far as South America. Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo and Santiago Andres Cafiero, Argentina's Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Trade, and Worship, consider the possibility of the importation during their meeting at Palacio San Martin in Buenos Aires last Wednesday. Meanwhile, at the top of the front page, AFP bears concerning resurgence of China vessels in West Philippine Sea. Apparently, several dozen Chinese fishing vessels have started cropping up, showing up, moving around land features within the Philippine area of responsibility and territory. Meanwhile, good news for the teachers, 11.6 billion released for teachers' bonuses. According to the Department of Budget and Management, DBM has released 11.6 billion as part of the performance-based bonuses of over 900,000 education personnel for 2021. Aray ko po, ha? 2 years late. Okay. Meanwhile, on another news, still related to rice, BBM states reliance on rice imports not a wise choice. Okay, President Marcos delivered his keynote address at the 10th Asian Summit in Singapore on Wednesday, hosted by the Milken Institute. The Asian Summit focuses on health, environmentalism, economic policy, and globalization, where President Bongbong Marcos stated that the reliance on importation as a solution to needs and shortages has turned out to be a bad idea for governance in the Philippines and for the country in general. In the meantime, the pandemic TV show, napaisip tuloy ako, ano itong pandemic TV show bows out? Okay, apparently the pandemic era public service program laging handa of state-run People's Television PTV will air its final episode today and will be replaced by a show titled Bagong Pilipinas Ngayon. Same dog, different color. Ayan po. In the center of the Philippine Star front page, Robinson's Malls wows with first mall Christmas installation in Metro Manila. Inunahan na ng Robinson's Mall lahat ng mall. Okay, a world of enchantment awaits shoppers at Robinson's Galleria, where a 40-foot Christmas tree with giant strings of pearls and an angel playing the season's melodies is made more magical by snow-kissed winter gates there at the mall. Okay, even the media, international media covering the FIBA mentioned how surprised they were that Filipinos officially started the Christmas season on September 1 because when the FIBA reporters visited our malls, ayun, bulaga sila, puno ng Christmas tree and heard so much Christmas carols. Meanwhile, House panel rebuffs ombudsman, retains COA initial audit report. The House Appropriations Committee will retain the regular publication of the initial audit observation memorandum of the Commission on Audit despite a request from the Ombudsman Samuel Martires to do away with it. In other words, yung suggestion po ni Ombudsman Martires na wag na lang, hindi daw pwede dahil nakakatulong sa Congress, sa Senado, at sa regulatory bodies. Okay. SIM cards from Pogos contain 1 billion in e-wallets. Around 28,000 subscriber identity module or SIM cards confiscated from Philippine offshore gaming operators in Pasay City last month were used to siphon 1 billion from the e-wallets of online fraud victims, according to the Department of Information, Communication, and Technology. Well done. But I withhold my opinion on that kasi kami po, we are suspecting that these are not just e-wallets or POGOs because, these POGO hubs are doing all sorts of business. What is to stop them from being contractual agents of corrupt politicians who are loading those SIM cards for vote buying? Just pointing that out. Anyway, DepEd not rallies to blame for low enrollment. Okay, there's a bite back from the Alliance of Concerned Teachers or ACT. Instead of blaming the drop in enrollees this school year on protests, Vice President and Education Secretary Sara Duterte should instead address the education crisis in the country is facing, according to ACT. Meanwhile, last piece of news, the Barangay Sangguniang Kabataan elections, PNP to deploy 187,500 personnel, will use drone technology as well as body cam, okay, to patrol, monitor, lalo na pag may dinadampot silang mga flying voters and mga vote buyers. Okay, so that about wraps up the front page of the Philippine Star today. We will now go for a quick break. When we return, we start with our discussions here on Agenda.
A recent report published by nonprofit Global Witness showed that the Philippines remains the worst country for environment defenders in Asia. This comes more than a week after 2 environmental activists were seized in Bataan. The report said that 11 of the 16 killings it monitored in Asia last year occurred in the Philippines. 3 were in Indonesia and 2 in India. The Philippines also ranked 5th most dangerous country in the world, following Latin American countries Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, and Honduras. The report showed at least 281 reported killings of environment defenders in the Philippines since 2012. A third involves those who speak out against company operations linked to the mining sector. What are some concrete efforts that government must do to protect environment defenders? Let's discuss that further on today's agenda.
John Bonifacio is the national coordinator of the Kalikasan People's Network for the Environment. A graduate of molecular biology from UP Diliman, Bonifacio is now a full-time climate and environmental activist. Along with this, Bonifacio also serves on the Advisory Council of International Human Rights watchdog Global Witness.
Good morning, John. Welcome to the program Agenda.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me here.
Okay, first of all, allow me to compliment you or to congratulate you and acknowledge your courage for being an environmental defender. Apparently, your line of work or your chosen passion is just as dangerous as being a journalist in the Philippines. The likes of us usually get harassed, if not get shot. But John, the report of the Global Witness gave names. They gave names of the environmental defenders that were murdered in 2022 in the Philippines. Now, I assume you've seen this list. Do you know any of these people?
Yes, unfortunately. The thing is, with the line of work that we get into, it's sort of troubling to see people that you know and people familiar names and even people you've met who unfortunately get killed, and of course other forms of harassment like getting arrested, red tagged, etc. So on that list, for example, we have the name of Chad Book, who may ring a bell, whose name might ring a bell to some. He was murdered in what is now known as the New Bataan 5 massacre, where 5 people were killed. So Chad was an indigenous school teacher based in Mindanao, and he was just helping out look for another place to set up, hopefully, what is an indigenous school when he was unfortunately murdered by reportedly state forces. So these kinds of incidents do do make it clear that people who are fighting for environmental rights, fighting to support our indigenous peoples and their rights to protect the environment, they are in the front lines and they are being targeted, unfortunately, for their advocacies.
Okay, now, if you don't mind, I would like to read the names. I just needed you to verify that the names here are legitimate or correct. And they are those who were murdered in 2022 are the following: Richard Mendoza, Chad Errol Book, Jele Hurain Ngujo II, Elgin Balonga, Robert Aragon, Tirso Anyar, Joseph Jimenez, Erickson Acosta, Silvestre Portaldes Jr., Rosemary Gallas, Eugene Lastrella. And that doesn't include those who were victims in 2023 and the recent disappearance of the 2 young girls. I mean, looking at the photos of those 2 in Bataan, they're girls. They're not, to me, they're not adult women. They're probably, I don't know, maybe they're in their early 20s. But clearly, whoever attacks environmental defenders don't make any exception between men and women, adults and young people. Now, what is the situation out there?
So in general, I think on top of all these killings, there are different attacks as well, as I mentioned. So people get arrested as well. People get red tagged, of course, harassed, and there are forms of surveillance that also take place, harassing our defenders. So, for example, just to give a few incidents this year, as you mentioned earlier, there are 2 who have been disappeared. So Janila and Jed, who were volunteers for a community organization in Bataan, looking into the issues that are affecting our fisher folk with reclamation in Manila Bay, were abducted suddenly. So you are correct. Jed and Janila were 22 and 21 years old, respectively. So they're very young. They're younger than me. So it really just makes clear that, as you mentioned, the people who are behind these things don't really care for these kinds of issues, whether they're women, whether they are young. It's all just fair game. If you're opposing these kinds of projects, you are possible targets for harassment and these kinds of abductions. Other than that, we've also had incidents of trumped up charges and illegal detention. So one of my other friends, Rowena Dasig, was arrested with Miguel Pinheiro a few months ago in Quezon for researching into a fossil fuel plant that will be built in the area. So these kinds of incidents are getting more and more brazen, I think, actually in recent months. We've had earlier this year the first recorded massacre under the new administration, the Fausta family who were killed, 4 people belonging to the Fausta family who were farm workers and part of a organization that was fighting for land rights in Negros were killed in an attack, reportedly again by state forces. So these kinds of massacres, killings, abductions, they're getting more and more frequent. And I think it's something that we really need to call out and hopefully act on immediately.
Okay, I don't want to fall into generalizations, John, because in the Masugi Geo Reserve issue, I know that there were certain individuals who had military or police background, past. They were past officers and were simply using their bata-bata or their, former personnel to impose their will on a community. Now, that's different from state forces, as you would term it. How sure are we, and why state forces? Because you would think that, if an area is being developed by a private sector, why would the government send in their uniformed personnel to implement the will of a private company?
Well, that is a good question to ask. We've had personal experience in our case where, for example, with private-public partnerships, so a lot of these projects do take on that form. Even just going there, some of our team would be, accosted or sort of stopped and held for a while by military people with long firearms. So it's very intimidating actually, going there and knowing the context and background of these kinds of killings. It's at least for a lot of environmental defenders, you do get that feeling that you're being watched or you're being harassed simply by those kinds of incidents. With regards to your question about the involvement of state forces in general, I think it's more about a lot of these projects are government projects, and there might be some military presence, supposedly to keep peace and order and all of that. But at least in our experience, based on the data and how we've seen family members, relatives, or neighbors report like how these killings took place, it seems like state forces are involved in putting down or silencing activists. And again, it has a broad range of manifestations. Killing is probably the worst manifestation of such, but we also have abductions, we also have arrests. And while there are other actors that are in play, there are some cases where private armies were deployed, or these were other people were behind these attacks. Unfortunately, even across the world, actually, not just in the Philippines, state forces have played a part in these kinds of killings.
You mentioned your friend. Well, I hope I got the name correct. Rowena, was it Rowena Dasig? You said,
Yes.
and her other associate. These two women, what happened to them? Have they been found? Were they able to get back to their families, or what was the outcome in their disappearance?
So they were detained actually. So we know where they are, but they don't have legal support yet. So it's been a few months actually at this point, which is very concerning because, well, in any case, for the background, Miguela and Rowena were looking into the possible health impacts of a natural gas or fossil gas power plant that was going to be developed in Antimonan, Quezon, when they were approached by the military and they were tagged as rebels, and that was the reason why they were brought to the detention center. And right now they're still detained up until now. So in that context, I mean, I know Owen. I worked with her before and in various issues in the area. For example, the Kaliwa Dam issue. So these kinds of attacks make it clear that why are people like Owen, Miguela, and of course the two women that we mentioned earlier, why are they being the ones attacked and harassed when honestly the advocacy is correct? And in my opinion, I think it's right that we fight for the environment. And even if we disagree with projects that are being put up, I think we should at least have that safety and security that our human rights will not get trampled. Yet unfortunately,
sorry, John. I'm more of like a solution finder type of guy. Have you ever, or has the military or the police ever sat down with our environmental defenders and say, hey guys, let's sit down and let's be clear who's an environmental defender and who is a communist sympathizer? Because, I mean, if you were on the other side of the coin also, you don't want to get shot in the back of your head because you trusted someone who turned out to be NPA or something. Okay, so has there been any efforts to like professionalize this relationship and this activity? Because truth be told, environmental defenders in this country has not been recognized as a job, as a profession, or it's more of like a activism, so to speak. So where are we in trying to establish a more professional, more respectful environment and interaction?
So on our end, with the various groups we're working with, so I'm part of Kalikasan as mentioned, but we have our friends over at the Center for Environmental Concerns, Environmental Defenders Congress. We're trying to craft a legal framework to sort of make it clearer who is an environmental defender and who is not. Because as you mentioned, actually a lot of the people who are protecting their lands, protecting their waters from these kinds of destructive projects, they don't recognize themselves as environmental defenders. They're simply people who want to keep living their way of life, essentially. So indigenous
Mhm.
peoples, farmers, fisher folk, who are unfortunately, living in the areas where these big projects are being built. So on that note, I think having a legal framework and sort of also, I guess, as you mentioned, professionalizing or formalizing ways of holding people accountable, engaging with people, dialogues. That's something we're exploring. So previously, we filed something in Congress known as the Environmental Defense Bill. So that's something that we tried to explore to, again, formalize everything in this process. But we're planning on refiling it again with this new Congress, and hopefully we can see some developments in the right direction in terms of, again, making sure the systems are in place so that we can have these dialogues, we can have these negotiations.
What are the concerns of the sector? What are the things you would like addressed or people to know about? Because, until I saw this report or pieces of this report, to be totally transparent, I only saw pieces of this report. People don't realize what 11 out of 16 deaths, murders were in the Philippines, etc. So, what would your message be, or what are the things you want to tell the people?
So I think when it comes to what we do as environmental defenders, of course, there are so many different issues that affect the environment, from illegal logging to pollution. But definitely, as we've seen in recent months, some of the major issues that are affecting various places of the country include issues like land reclamation, so that affects our coastal ecosystems. We heard recently from President Marcos himself that land reclamation suspended in Manila Bay due to these various concerns that have been raised by civil society. So those are the kinds of developments that we're monitoring. But unfortunately, even with those kinds of announcements, we can still see that people are very much interested in continuing the projects. There's also the fact that environmental defenders have been harassed and even abducted in recent months. So that's something we're monitoring. Other than that, of course, as you mentioned earlier, mining is also a big issue. We
Yeah,
heard about.
but what about? I'm sorry, John. Okay, because I'm very concerned about people being killed and people disappearing, especially those two young ladies. So where are we with that? Because I think more than anything, that is what needs to be addressed: the recognition that environmental defenders are not enemies of the state, that environmental defenders have to professionalize their ranks and be accountable, but also be documented, and there should be coordination. But where are we with the disappearance of the two young ladies in Bataan?
Okay, so at this point in time, we don't know where they are. So that's still something that's very concerning. We are working with government institutions like the Commission on Human Rights, as well as international institutions. Some foreign embassies have actually reached out and expressed concern over the issue. So we're hoping to really make sure that all these different mechanisms are explored, so that, again, the priority at the end of the day is to make sure that we get to see them alive again, no matter what. So I think that's what we're trying to engage with all these different institutions. Um, and yeah, at this point in time, we're still, again, trying to locate them. But hopefully, within the next few days, Saturday, for example, would mark 2 weeks since their disappearance. We'll get to find them. And I think these first 30 days are very critical, because after 1 month, it's going to be very difficult to know where they are or how they are. So I think, all hands are on deck, essentially, and on our end when it comes to finding the two.
Okay, regarding what you mentioned, the environmental defense bill, Who's championing it? Who's authoring it? Why? Where is it now?
As I mentioned earlier, we're still in the process of refiling it as of the moment. It was previously filed by our partners in, I believe, the Bayan Muna party list way back. So that was before they were still in Congress essentially. So now we're still
Mhm.
looking for partners to work with. We are trying to develop the bill as well to reflect recent developments in the situation. So of course, updating the data and also engaging with other established lawyers to screen it and also comment on it. So hopefully we can see some developments around the environmental defense bill towards the end of the year or early next year, so that again we can try to formalize and hopefully address the problem at hand.
What would be the one thing you want that bill to reflect or at least focus on?
I think a big thing that the bill can contribute to is ending this sort of culture of impunity. Because out of the 11 that were killed last year, and the 270 that were killed in the 9 years before then, hardly any of those were the perpetrators caught or held accountable or put into trial or any of that. So I think something that the bill can really contribute to is putting up those mechanisms in which people who do carry out these heinous crimes are held accountable, whether they are punished or put into jail or what have you. I think that's going to send a good message to everyone else who is contemplating on violating human rights and for the sake of these kinds of big developments that destroy the environment. They would think twice about pursuing those kinds of measures.
Well, you are a brave man, my friend, and I pray that the Lord would protect you, and I pray for your fellow environmental defenders that people will come to realize, recognize that it's a sacrifice that you do from your heart, and we pray that the Lord blesses the work of your hands. Have a good day, John.
Thank you, you too, and thank you to everyone who listened.
Okay. And that's John Bonifacio, National Coordinator, Kalikasan People's Network for the Environment. Please say a prayer for those two young ladies who were kidnapped last week in Bataan. We pray. I appeal to those people who feel they are trying to scare or intimidate. Please, these could be your daughters. Let them go if they're still around. Let them go. Thank you. We'll go for a quick break. We'll be right back here on Agenda.
Do you want to see Metro Manila in a fun, interesting, and unique way? This is what WanderManila aims for Pinoys and foreigners who are eager to learn more about this urban city. The touring company offers customized tours for its customers to have an unforgettable and educating experience in Metro Manila. They have tours showcasing the unique cuisine of Malabon City, the Chinese-Filipino community history in Binondo, and the most popular one, the Macabra Stories in Intramuros. This tour attracts people who are up for some true crime and other dark stories in the historical walled city. Let's talk about this more on today's agenda.
Benjamin Canapi is the head tour guide of WanderManila. Prior to this, he was a media practitioner for over a decade. When he's not tour guiding, Canapi stages art and craft fairs and teaches film and video subjects in the CIIT College of Arts and Technology in Quezon City.
Good morning to you, Benjamin. Welcome to the program agenda.
Good morning, sir. Glad to be here.
Okay, I almost did not include you in the list because I saw horror stories. I said, enough. Life is horrorful enough in the Philippines. Let's not try to highlight horror. But apparently, you have a very interesting tour of the Intramuros, the walled city, and the horror stories. I mean, horror stories, the only horror stories people tell me about was during the time of the Japanese occupation, World War II, and the horror story of stepping on horse manure or not being able to find parking. Now, what horror stories are you talking about, and how did you manage to come up with this idea?
Okay, so back in 2019, we formulated, WanderManila formulated a tour called the One Night in Intramuros. And it was supposed to be a dark history tour of the walled city. While it was a Halloween tour, we kind of wanted to steer away from, the typical ghost stories and whatnot that you usually get when you're doing a night tour. And instead, we focused on real events that happened within Intramuros that would be considered dark or violent or macabre. So we started doing that back in Halloween in 2019, and then during the pandemic, we did that as a live stream, which really caught on. So much so na ever since we resumed touring after the pandemic, when we were allowed to do so, most people were looking for the dark history tour, not the normal tours. So that's it basically. The composition of One Night in Intramuros, it's again, hindi siya takutan. We're not here to invent like ghost stories here and there. We actually focus more on some of the more violent stories from the history of Intramuros. And admittedly, around 50% of that focuses on the Battle of Manila and Granaman. It's really not avoidable. It is really part of the history of Intramuros.
Okay, so I would assume that it starts with the Spanish occupation, going to the Japanese occupation, the American entry, etc. So, but I'm surprised you're actually allowed to do these tours at night because the general impression is Intramuros shuts down after 9.
Well, we don't really start naman ng gabing-gabi. The tour technically always starts at 5 o'clock in the evening. So there's still a bit of light while we are walking, and it just gets dark midway. But I'd also like to dispel the notion that Intramuros is too dark and it shuts down totally. Granted, there are admittedly no hangout spots in the walled city as of now, but the public areas are very, very well lit now. It's actually very nice and safe to walk around in Intramuros at night, and it does make for very fantastic pictures and consequently really good experiences. That's why now I'm not the only tour group that actually offers night tours, although it's big, and part and parcel of that is because the Intramuros administration has gone out of their way to make it a wonderful experience for everybody who visits the walled city.
Okay. Now, what's the program? How do you get to join that tour? What's the cost? How long? How do you prepare for it? Because the first thing in mind was like parents with children below 12 years old, stay out of this.
I do get a lot of questions about parents. Is this safe? Is this okay? And granted, a lot of children have joined this tour. I wouldn't automatically advise it because some of the material can be very graphic. But I guess we can. I guess I can rate this tour PG or parental guidance. As long as the parents are there to explain what's going on, they should be fine. Now, as far as
Mhm.
preparing the tour, we do offer this tour as a public offering like once or twice a month. This coming October,
Mm.
however, because it's Halloween season, we're going to open for 4 days, basically for everybody who wants to come in and join. So basically, we'll make an announcement over our social media accounts. Those who want to join can just sign up and pay in advance. The usual rate for public tours is 800 per person.
Okay, not bad. Does that come with a free bottle of beer?
Unfortunately, it does not. It will pay for the entrance fee of for Santiago, and we do have a souvenir.
Okay, no, I'm teasing you because I tried to think like the foreigners. They
Ah,
probably go,
yes.
bloody hell, it's so humid here. Where's my beer? Okay, but anyway, it's that's so. How long is the night tour, and how much walking is involved? Because
Oh, yeah.
we're not talking on level surface. Perfect sidewalks. There's a lot of uneven surface in the walled city.
That's unfortunately true. The tour would last somewhere between 2.5 to 3 hours, and it really depends on the walking pace of the group. I estimate the walking distance of the tour to be roughly around 7,000 steps, or roughly 3 kilometers. It's it's a bit long. It's
Okay.
admittedly a long tour.
Okay. 7,000 steps. That should be how many hours did you say? 3 hours?
2.5 to 3 hours.
2.5 to 3 hours. If it's a senior citizen, well, they will be slow in the beginning, but when they pick up, they leave the pack behind in the end. So I have seen that
I
in
have seen it too.
practically every tour group I've joined. They mock the elderly until the elderly leave the young ones catching their breath. But okay, so is this one of those things that you come with extra clothing and face towels because you're going to be sweating at the end?
Well, I definitely have the face towel and a couple of wet wipes on. So we have to we have to keep up appearances there. But generally, at least that's the nice thing about doing a night tour in Intermuros. As you're progressing along the tour, it actually becomes cooler and less
Mm-hmm.
warm, as opposed to like doing a morning tour, which admittedly we have a lot of requests to do. For example, you start at 8 o'clock. By the time you hit 10, 11 o'clock, the sun's out and it's really warm. So
Yeah.
the preference of starting afternoon to evening, very attractive because it's very comfortable.
Yeah, and it adds to the ambiance, to the sense of dread or the drama.
Yes.
Now, 2.5 hours. That Benjamin, that's not. It's not easy to sustain or to maintain the focus, the interest of a big group. If you're just going to be telling stories about who got shot or who got his head lopped off, etc. I'm sure you've curated the stories that you tell.
I do. Yes, and very good point, sir. I do try to keep a balance between being factual and for being factual at the same time being entertaining. I don't
Mhm.
shy away from cracking jokes and trying to make people laugh, even in a dark history tour such as this. Admittedly, a lot of the stories have a bit of absurdism in them. Of course, I also know the point of where to rein that in and be serious and be severe, especially when you're talking about specifically the Manila massacres and stuff like that. It's not to be trifled with. And and I usually get a lot of my guests becoming very, very somber and very, very reflective when we get to that point, especially with the locals. And
Mhm.
surprisingly, you keep asking the locals, did you learn this in school? And you get complete silence there. And then this just feeds on the realization, and that's why we do the things that we do. Tour, this tour is not just supposed to be entertaining; it's supposed to be education, and I hope that I'm hitting the fine balance between both aspects.
Do you tell people in advance we are going to go to this tunnel, we're going to go
Ah,
into this room in this chamber, or do you just like, okay, come in, come in? Oh, incidentally, you are stepping in the same room where 1,000 Filipinos were massacred. Uh,
um, unf- if it were up to me, I would just love to surprise my guests with where we're going. Unfortunately, a lot of people really want to know what the itinerary is, so we do give that in advance. What we don't
mhm.
give out is the content or what we're going to be talking about per venue.
Yeah. What is your observation? The difference between a foreign group
Ah,
and the local group, because I know there are sensibilities involved, and
oh,
being married to a foreigner, it's like I'm like a juggler here.
oh, that is true. Um, Generally, we get more for this particular tour. We get more locals because it's not a tour I would advise for first timers, people who visiting Manila or Intramuros for the first time. I don't advise this because this kind of assumes that they already know something up, not just about Intramuros, but the basic history of the Philippines. Now,
Mm.
having said having said that, I've had foreign guests here before, and you do have to watch out for certain things that you talk about and certain nationalities. Like for example, if you have Americans in the group, maybe back up a little bit about um how much damage General Douglas MacArthur did when staging the Battle of Manila, stuff like that. If you have Japanese, maybe soften the blow. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying don't talk about it because you have to, but maybe just step back a bit and not be too harsh. But that's more or less the balancing act I do with regards to certain nationalities and people of certain persuasions that really try to gauge what they're listening to, what they're not, or if I'm inadvertently offending somebody or not. And it's always been an interesting balance to keep.
Has that ever happened? Have you offended a
Yes.
tourist? And have you experienced a participant crying, getting emotional from the stuff?
Okay. I'll start first with offending. You would think that if you talk about the Battle of Manila, you would offend Japanese citizens. In fact, and the fact of the matter is, they're some of the most apologetic, understanding people when it comes to their history. I've had two walkouts from Americans. Basically, when you start talking about the Americans were the ones who started shelling Manila to try to flush the Japanese out, and they caused all this destruction of the city and the consequent death via friendly fire. A lot of them will start getting indignant and say that we saved you from the Japs. We did what they have to do and all of that. And they walked out. So I don't want to say anything more specific about that, but yes, that has happened to me. With regards to people getting moved or touched, it has happened also. And sometimes I get surprised that it does. Like, I do want people to understand the gravity of the topics that I'm presenting, but it always surprises me that I get to them so to the extent that they start crying. Um, Again, it's usually when people realize just how much Manila has lost throughout the centuries and that how important a city this was and that none of us realize it at this point in time, then that gets to them. And and while I don't go out of my way to make people cry, I do go out of my way to make people realize what an important, significant city Manila is. That's the goal.
Okay.
That's always been the goal.
Okay, let's go take a break. And when we return, let's try to make this a little more cheerful. Let's talk
I
about the
agree.
other tour. Let's talk about the other tour, the Malabon tour and the China tour, the
Okay.
Chinatown tour, because that we had that in our list of to-do list when my daughter was here, but unfortunately we ran out of time. But we'll go for a quick break. When we return, we'll come back with Benjamin Canapi to talk about the Chinatown tour and the Malabon food trip. We'll be right back here on Agenda. Welcome back to the program Agenda, your program. And today, as our closing segment, we are featuring Benjamin Canapi of Wonder. How do you say it, Benjamin? Wonder
Wonder
what?
Manila. Wonder Manila.
Wonder Manila. Okay. Oh, now I get it because I kept thinking wonder, but it's Wander.
Yes.
WANDER. Okay. There now the brain is connecting. Anyway, you were talking about the night tour, the horror story tour of Intramuros. Let's talk about something more delectable. The Manila food trip, and of course the Chinatown history.
Okay. Now, on our normal offerings, most people will request or ask for a food crawl of Binondo, and that's not surprising because Binondo is first and foremost a food destination. So we try to mix up a little bit of history, a little bit of culture, traditions to showcase that, and while bringing them to some, shall we say, open secret restaurants. The challenge right now with going around Binondo is a lot of people are familiar with the most popular restaurants. And so these restaurants, and we're talking about Chwanki and Wying and Mezzanine, already have long lines as early as 7 in the morning. So the
Mhm.
challenge was to be able to create a food tour featuring restaurants with good food that don't necessarily have the lines. So you don't want naman your guests to go there, then you're going to line up 45 minutes to get a seat. You don't want that. So, yun. And fortunately, we were able to find a couple of restaurants that are interesting.
Okay, what about for vegetarians like me?
Ah, Binondo actually has a handful of vegetarian restaurants, and if you certain restaurants have vegetarian dishes, especially those that do banquet style, like Golden Fortune and Presidents, they do have vegetarian options. And there's also restaurants like Veggie Select that is pure vegetarian. So yeah, you do have options. We do have options.
Okay, now you have the Malabon food
Ah,
trip.
no, that's a
Why is Malabon being pushed, heralded as a culinary destination?
okay. So first and foremost, one of the missions of Wonder Manila is not just to reintroduce people to the wonders of Old Manila, but to look for other places and locals within Metro Manila that might be interesting. So aside from this, I currently also offer a Poblacion Makati tour. The Malabon tour is a partnership with another group called Eat Matters. Its proprietor, Isela Reno, is a native of Malabon and has introduced us to so many unique food offerings within that city. Now, Malabon is one of the old Spanish era cities, and aside from a lot of the heritage structures that are still there, such gorgeous places, for some reason, its food offerings are quite unique. It's almost like being in the province, in the sense that the food is similar, but there are differences, there are unique stuff here. Like, for example, well, everybody knows about Pancit Malabon. I don't think I need to tell anybody on how
Mhm.
wonderful a dish that is. But
Yeah.
for example, there is a restaurant in Malabon called Judy Ann's where they serve crispy pata that is slattered with pickle juice, and it just works. There's also a small outlet in Malabon that offers a type of turon that is basically shaped like a triangle, and the flavor profile is different. Then aside from that, you have all the kakanin from Concepcion Market. Malabon is the home of Dolores, one of the most popular places to buy kakanin from. And there's just so much that the city has to offer. And in conjunction with Eat Matters, we really want to introduce this to a wider audience.
All right. Well, last question because we're
Sure.
running out of time. Could you please give us how do people sign up, contact, or get in touch with you?
Okay. Now you can find us at WanderManila.com, Facebook.com/WanderManila, and at Instagram at Wonder.Manila. Wonder Manila is open for private tours, if just in case you want a Manila experience for you and your family or your friends or your office mates. Just leave us a message. We'll take care of you.
Okay, well, I wish you all the best, and I'm almost certain we'll be meeting each other in person. And let's see if you can scare me out of my shoes when we go to Intramuros. Thank you very much. God bless you, Benjamin.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it, sir.
Okay, that's Benjamin Canapi, Wander Manila. They have the tour, the night tour of the walled city, of Chinatown, and of Malabon. So maybe you want to get in touch with them, do something this weekend. I don't know if they have something available. Anyway, let's go to our final blessing for this week, our declaration, and it is from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 33. Verse 12, let the beloved of the Lord rest secure in him, for he shields him all day long, and the one the Lord loves rests between his shoulders. Whatever life may throw at you, however you may feel, declare that God loves you, he will protect you, he will defend you, he will provide for you. Just acknowledge him as your God, your Lord, and your Savior. Okay, that's it for this week. We do hope to see you again next week. Please include us in your prayers team agenda and our families. And we do hope you'll keep it here on One News.